Bumble and Bumble, Seven Haircare, Bellami Haircare, and now you're at Garrett Leight. By definition, you have a great track record.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
My career was devoted to working with small business owners, salon owners, hairstylists, from celebrities to independents to large salons. The purpose there, from a business standpoint, B2B, is when you know what you should do, you just act upon it. And when you're not sure, you should not only slow down, but you should reach out to anybody you think who might help you, because ultimately your job is to make the right decision.
How do you look at the future, and what are you doing as an executive to feel confident as best as you can about decisions you're going to make for 2024 when it's not even clear what that year is going to look like?
Yeah.
Welcome to The Millionaire Hairstylist, where our mission is to improve the financial well-being of creative professionals. And today we have a treat. Ryan Sieverson is the CEO of Garrett Leight California Optical. It's a really, really cool fashion eyewear brand. But his background is in the beauty industry as the executive with companies like Bumble and Bumble, Seven Haircare, Bellami, Estee Lauder. The list goes on, and his wealth of experience and knowledge gives him incredible insight into topics like allocating resources, building a brand, growing a business, making decisions that will affect the direction of a company. Does that sound familiar to the kind of things that you do on a day-to-day basis? I thought so. I think you're going to really enjoy and find this conversation, as always, as we hope to do, super actionable for you and your business today. If you do find value in this conversation and you want to share with others, give us a 5-star review in the podcast platform of your choice. And if you haven't signed up yet for the free courses we offer at millionairehairstylistpodcast.com, do that for yourself. Here's Ryan Sieverson on The Millionaire Hairstylist. This is a very exciting meeting for me. Ryan Sieverson, our guest today. I mean, when we talk about veterans of the beauty industry and now the fashion and eyewear industry, this is what we're talking about. Bumble and Bumble, Seven Haircare, Bellami Haircare, and now you're at Garrett Leight. And it's just truly exciting to have you with us. So thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks for the invitation. I do appreciate it. I appreciate those kind words too. I think a lot of my relationship with Cash, how we instantly hit it off, and how I've leaned on him in many ways for business advice and just overall good life vibes.
Oh, I appreciate that. Can you tell us how you know Cash? What's your side of that origin story?
We were doing a PR event in New York City, and he's somebody that I knew through social media and through outreach. I said, hey, make sure and invite this person and these people, and Cash showed up to that event. What he didn't know at the time is that we were fishing for somebody to be sort of the creative lead spokesperson for the brand. And that's really where the conversation evolved to. And now, in many ways, Cash is that. I know that he is an invited keynote speaker at a number of events at that brand, Seven Haircare.
Yeah, I remember when Cash was saying, I think I might be getting my first big brand partnership, and we're doing test shoots and we're bringing in models and doing all these things. That was a big chapter in your life, Cash, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And I was so excited. Actually, that event I was really not supposed to go to. Well, I was supposed to go to it, but my wife is the one who made me. So Coco was like, get your ass out there, go to this event. And I was like, oh, but I get these invites and I go, and then it's a cool kid crowd. And you know, I just walk around and everyone thinks they're amazing. And I'm like, this is not my scene. And then I went, and it actually was incredible. Like the culture, the team, and Ryan came up and introduced himself, and we immediately connected. And I had no idea what was going on. I just thought I was supposed to show up to this event, eat some hors d'oeuvres, and talk with people. And it turned out that I would build some really, really powerful relationships over the following years. It was a really cool experience. And over the years, I've learned so much from Ryan, watching him in president roles, CEO roles across multiple companies. And he's a wealth of beauty industry and business knowledge. And I can't wait to get to ask him questions that I never get to pull him aside for and get his time and ask him questions. So
we're gonna put you to work, Ryan. We want to work through some of your insights. You know, I will say though, as a setup for our audience to further on this, you know, Ryan, Cash, and I were talking yesterday about sitting down to talk with you, and you know, this audience is creative professionals, largely hairstylists, salon owners, people who are working in the beauty industry and the hair industry. And you know, when you use words like executive or C-suite or CEO, that's not a word you hear a lot in the salon world. It's not a word you hear when you're behind the chair. And I think there's always there's a hesitancy to sort of be like, that's not my world. I'm not an executive. I don't think like an executive. I'm a small business owner. And Cash, and I think you and I were talking about yesterday how so much of what you've learned as a beauty professional and then a creative professional and now an entrepreneur is what creatives can learn from the C-suite, what they can learn from executives. Can you just expand on that a little bit, Cash? Because I think that's so important for people. It's tune into the people who are running the biggest companies because there's so much to learn from that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a huge thing that I noticed in coming from the beauty industry as a hairstylist in the freelance world. I worked with tons of different people all the time. So I wasn't going into one salon for the large portion of my career. It was makeup artists, photographers, digital techs. It was designers, graphic artists, fashion designers. So there's tons and tons of creative professionals. And the lessons that I learned that were the most powerful were from some of these executives of these companies, some of the CEOs, CFOs, CMOs. They had just been there and kind of done that and seen things that as a creative entrepreneur and as a small business owner, I had not. So learning those lessons from people like Ryan, who have held very high C-suite positions in very large companies, these are very, very large companies, it was life-changing. And so I felt like for a long time, I let my identity as an artist get in the way of me connecting with people who are in the C-suite or in executives of companies or in finance and business. So early on in my career, I realized that was sort of like a block for me. And once I opened that door and started asking questions and saying, hey, well, what are you guys doing at that company? How do you do this? How do you do that? It was life-changing.
I love that. Ryan, where did this all start for you?
Actually at FIDM. And I thought it would be interesting to tell this sort of full circle story here with you today. When I graduated high school, I was in a hell of a hurry to grow up and move out and make money. And so I didn't go to college right away. I instead got a job as a courier, and then I worked some time in construction. And then I realized, okay, I probably do need to invest in further education. And, my dad asked me, if you could do anything you want with your life, what would it be? I said, oh, wow. If I could do anything, I would love to make clothes. I have a particular interest, not only in the style, but the construction. And he says, okay, great. Let's pursue this. Let's look at Orange Coast College, community college near where I grew up. Ultimately, I landed at the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising. And very quick lesson there in less than a year. Following your passions is great to an extent, but if you don't have the talent to match it, it's not a very worthwhile pursuit. And I learned really quickly that I didn't have what it took to become the next Gianni Versace, which is what I was thinking it was going to turn out to be. However, I learned a great deal about fashion, about business. And actually, I found that while I chose the design path, I don't have really the creative capabilities for that. I really did enjoy learning the business of fashion. And so my full circle comment comes to fruition here. I now work at a fashionable company, and actually Garrett Leight, the company's founder, his wife is a fashion designer and a instructor at FIDM.
No way.
Wow. That is full circle.
What's it like to be back in that world?
I would draw more correlations to beauty in what I do and in this category than necessarily fashion, fast fashion, haute couture, or otherwise. Those things I still have a great deal of interest in. But this business is much more like the business I'm used to, although it's a different category. For almost 30 years, my career was devoted to working with small business owners, the cash, salon owners, hairstylists, from celebrities to independents to large salons. And the purpose there from a business standpoint, B2B, is you want to be of the greatest level of service and support so that those people can provide the greatest level of service and support to their clients. So you give them the tools that they would need to finish out their work. And here, that's just the same, at least at this brand, Garrett Leight California Optical. We are optical experts. So our sincere focus is on supporting opticians, optometrists, and optical retailers and providing them with the frames, yes, fashionable, of course, but really it's a sincere focus on supporting the people who have that capability to provide, medical services and life improvement for people who have problems with their vision. We're now just serving those small business owners who happen to be skilled in the arts of optics, as opposed to those who are skilled in the arts of hair coloring, hair care, scalp care, and otherwise. So I guess what I'm ultimately describing is that B2B wholesale support that my brand's represented in beauty is just the same as what we represent here at Garrett Leight.
And it gives you an incredible perspective, by the way, just on small businesses in both of those industries. I love that. I love that you have this sort of 30,000 foot perspective on not just a few salons or a few places that might carry a line in the beauty industry or a few optical shops, as you mentioned, but sort of across the spectrum. So we should definitely come back to that. But Cash, what did you want to ask?
Well, I just wanted to point out that he sort of is living out what I've observed over small businesses. So often we think, oh, my business is so unique. When actually, there's so many models that can be applied from other businesses and other industries. And that's why we interview people from industries beyond the beauty industry, because there's so many brilliant ideas and so many business models that can be taken that can be a unique thing within your industry. You can take things from the fashion, the eyewear industry, and implement them into a small business, into a creative business as a painter, tattoo artist, makeup artist, dentist, whatever. And the models still work. But they seem new to your industry and can work on that segment of audience in the same way, but feel very fresh and new and give you a competitive edge. I think it's brilliant that he's taking sort of that Ryan, you are taking your experience in the beauty industry and applying it and finding that the models still cross over. Are you finding that there is a lot of similarities between the models between the beauty industry and then going into fashion?
There is. And again, I would qualify it by saying it's the brands I work with and the brands I do currently now represent.
Sure.
Not all are like this, but one of the other similarities I would draw is we, of course, have a website and we, of course, have e-commerce, but the purpose of it isn't to generate a lot of revenue. The purpose of it is to inform people about quality eyewear and necessarily then to direct them to an optometrist or an optician in their local market so that they can get the full service. And even in our stores, we have 8 GLCO stores, 3 in the LA area, 3 in the New York City area, 1 in Austin, 1 in San Francisco. And each of those pretty small footprint stores, but they have a lab. And yes, they are really well appointed and they're cleverly designed and they're cool places to hang out and bring your dog and have a coffee and just talk to somebody about eyewear. But they have a lab in the back. You literally can just bring in any frame to our stores. And while you wait, we can cut a new lens for you based on your prescription. We can provide a custom tint for your sunglasses. And as a matter of fact, I just, for my daughter's upcoming wedding, I got the Robert Downey Jr. tint. They just did it for me yesterday, which is it's a blue-gray grady light tint on a sunglass. So many similarities in the way that we service what we call in the beauty industry clients. And,
the blue-gray,
and now in this industry, they're known as patients for the most part, if you have a prescription.
Did he invent that tint? I know exactly what you're talking about. That sort of like bluish red carpet look. Is that unique to him? Did he pioneer that somehow?
I don't know who to give credit for, except to say we did it. We did that.
Wow. That is so cool. If you want to dig deeper into improving your relationship with money as a creative professional, go to millionairehairstylistpodcast.com. Create a free student account and you can access over 4 hours of free financial lessons on topics like calculating exactly what financial freedom would look like for you as a creative professional. Go to millionairehairstylistpodcast.com, create your free account today. I think this is let's talk about branding a little bit, Ryan, because again, this is one of those things where I think smaller businesses tend to just be very focused on, I need clients in the door, I need to pay overhead, maybe I'm not having a second location, but especially in this day and age with the advent of social media and with websites and with just the presence that every company seemingly has everywhere and needs to have in order to really grow and thrive, branding has become so important. And I'm just curious, how do you approach a brand? How do you approach thinking about how a brand should feel and how it should look? Obviously, you've come into businesses that just have something established, but as a CEO, as an executive, it's so much your job to guide that. What are some of the things you feel that you've learned about establishing strong brand? I mean, when you say Robert Downey Jr., talk about a brand. When you talk about, we all understand what that means, but what have you learned about trying to build something like that actually has an impact in a market and that people really understand something about?
Well, to a great extent, I hope it doesn't seem like an overstatement, but your brand is your differentiator, right? In a sea of, I just did a quick study on it. There's almost 40,000 opticians and optometrists in the United States. So like, how do you stand out there? In the salon world, depending on what study you read, it's over 100,000. So how do you stand out? I'll give you from my chair and my experience, the way I've approached it is, for the most part, I have led brands that had distinct founders, either singular founders or multiple founders. And I viewed it as my responsibility was to understand the ethos, the things that, made them want to create something in the first place, the things that they want to make sure are always there, often known as pillars. And then as a general manager, president, CEO, my job is to make sure that those are weaved inextricably throughout every touch point, whether it's our own store or it's an independent store or it's our website or otherwise. If you've got something that makes you different and special, you also have to understand it's not going to be for everybody. I mean, our whole proposition is California style, right? Mm-hmm. Immediately, you can say California anywhere in the world, and people have this image of what California represents. So that's what we run with. But it's authentic because our founder grew up in Venice. And there's arguably nothing more California than Venice, right?
The most.
It's eclectic. It's got the beach. It's got the bodybuilders. It's got the taco trucks. It's got it all. And so as a brand steward, my job is to make sure that is well communicated and it's consistent and that we bring it back. So if I was a small business owner, I would want to understand what is it that makes me different than the salon down the street, or what is it that makes my small optometry shop different than Lens Crafters, and and understanding, who will probably never come here and who should come here, and figure out how to appeal to that latter portion.
I think where you're hitting on is, you said inextricably weave the brand throughout every touch point. And I think that's brilliant. And that's exactly what creating that omnipresence should look like. My God, is that overwhelming and complicated for a lot of small brands who maybe don't have a branding team or don't have the execution. Maybe they've got a contractor in the Philippines doing their emails that look nothing like their physical space. What are some strategies, or is there a role or a particular way, or is there a document or a style guide, or what are the tools that you use to make sure that brand is inextricably weaved throughout every touch point, and that's upheld as the company grows and as more people become a part of that team?
Yes, yeah, good. Your last point, though, about the brand book or style guide, it goes by a number of different names. That's the first thing I look for, and that's more on the sort of nerdy business side of things. Like, okay, tell me who we are and how do we communicate, and does everybody have a copy of it? It's kind of like the employee handbook, except for branding. And then, of course, you have to make sure that it's well understood and well communicated. But to your first point, Ash, it is so difficult to do. I have worked with brands that had a very strong creative lead, whether that's an art director or, in the salon industry, oftentimes that's your head of education. They are leading the charge of the looks and how you're going to train people to use the products. And in other brands I've worked at, it's been more of a collaboration, like a creative collective of people. And both can work. But it's really, as I see it, it's the general manager's responsibility to ensure that what the e-commerce team and the marketing team and the sales team and the product team are doing always remains consistent to that message. And it's not easy to do because we get in a hurry and we have deadlines to meet and we want to push emails out. That's a really good example, by the way, because I've seen that to be one of the great pitfalls of consistent branding is like, oh yeah, we've got to get Klaviyo wound up and we got to kick out these emails for this, campaign.
Where's that logo again? I can't find the logo.
That's the hero image, or was that? And then somebody looks at it, especially the founder, is like, that's not the hero image. And I'm like, yeah, not easy to be sure, but it's worth doing.
You're just like explaining what I've been going through. I run multiple companies, and the issue of having multiple teams work on things. And that's why I asked this question, because I'm like, so I get people emailing or whatever. It's, hey, I just saw the email. That's the old logo. That's the 2020 version. Like, it's been updated since then. Or, hey, that's not the type font that we're using in that place. We don't use that in subtext. There is so much chaos as you're trying to grow a business that these little things, we like, so many business owners seem to think they don't matter. But what you're saying is they do matter, and I believe they matter. If you're actually going to build a brand presence that does differentiate itself, and that when people see and experience that brand at every touch point, they identify with what's behind that brand because it looks the same, it feels the same every time. I mean, can you imagine like selling yourself and then showing up looking completely different to something? Like if I was, selling suits and I looked like a great tailor, and the next day I show up in like overalls with oil and I look like a truck driver or something. It's just you wouldn't know what to expect from me. But that's kind of what the consumer's experience is with brands that can't get this straight. And I have struggled with that. Is there something like a tactic or a form of organization that you use? And I'm just asking for myself personally to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Is there a specific thing you do?
Yeah, there has been a specific thing I do. And I also try to keep in mind that you don't want to create bottlenecks. You don't want to choke off processes, especially the creative process, by making sure everything goes through numerous rounds of reviews before it goes out. Like that's the concept of, it's before it's even perfect, just make it executable. However, what I've employed in my time, I'm about to do it here. As a matter of fact, we just held a town hall, and it was my first introduction to the global team at Garrett Leight. That was earlier this morning. And so I had an opportunity to address everybody at once. I'm 80 days in.
Wow.
My 80th day
as CEO.
As CEO, yes. And I'm soon going to hit the road, and I'm going to be meeting a great many people. Interestingly, I know this is a tangent, but this industry is run on trade shows. Actual, not only, you don't even question whether you do the trade shows, it's how big a booth, and customers buy. They place their orders at these trade shows. It takes me all the way back in like 30 years. My first foray into the salon and beauty industry was the Long Beach Hair Show. And it was exhausting because we sold so much product. And now over the course of time, then I realized, okay, then we stopped selling product. And then it was not cool to be in the trade shows as a great beauty brand. And this is like, I don't know if it's, 20 years behind or 10 years ahead, but trade shows are everything. And so I'm getting ready to get out and meet everybody, and I'm going to be in Amsterdam, Paris, Munich, and Milan in the next 3 months.
Do you like travel, or does it wear you out?
I do. I had a nice break from it, like most people during COVID and the pandemic. So I enjoyed not traveling, and I convinced myself that, there's a lot of good to being home every night. And now I'm ready to do it again. So I think it's a matter of timing and environment. But I've always enjoyed experiencing new things, meeting new people, eating new foods. And I'm not afraid of people, and I'm not afraid of ordering something I may not like. And I am just afraid of coach class airfare.
I will say though, Ryan, I love travel, and I think one of the reasons I like it, and I'm very curious how this goes for you, and now we're officially on a tangent here, but who cares? One of the things I like about travel is there's a sort of, even though you have your laptop and you have your phone and you have Wi-Fi on planes now, you sort of like slip into an alternate universe where the expectations on your replies to emails and to be on calls sort of changes. And now you're sort of in your own adventure, even though you're still supporting the broader initiative of what you're working on. I always just liked that. I always like to slip away to the airport and it's kind of like, I'm traveling, I'm working, but I'm not. And I'm curious how that goes for you as a CEO. Do you still feel like you're a slave to the emails, or do you feel like you get to escape a little bit because you're on the road?
No. I do have excellent office techniques that I apply when I fly. I know what I want to get done. But just as you were describing, I view it as an escape. And it's an opportunity for me to not have to produce a report, chair a meeting, or, just really even talk to anybody. So I'm that guy, by the way, if you sit next to, I probably don't want to talk.
Yeah, 100%. Got my AirPods in, got my laptop.
Yeah, like use my imagination, cue into some new music. I'll put, my Spotify on like, you pick Spotify and just play me something, right? But importantly for me, it's my time to catch up on reading. Mm-hmm. I must admit, I'm a slave to the digital. I'm a slave to the laptop. I do a lot of work. I think I'm pretty proficient, and I need to stop and open a physical book every once in a while and sort of get lost in that. And I have a balance of it. I'll read one book for business betterment. And when I finish that, then I read something for pleasure. And then I read something for business betterment, and then something for pleasure.
What are your last two books in those categories?
My last two books in those categories. Well, I'll give you one that I'm reading right now for pleasure. It was my daughter's recommendation. She said it was the best book she'd read in years. It's called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow.
That's a Shakespeare line, isn't it, from Macbeth? Is it referential of Shakespeare at all?
Oh, I haven't got that far into it.
Okay,
I'll let you
I'm
know.
curious. Well, please do.
Yeah, I'll let you know about that. And then some of my best business reads are actual rereads, and so Thinking Fast and Slow is one of that, which, I mean, it's not really like a business read, but to me, it informs. I'm fascinated by how people make decisions, like the psychology of decision making, biases. I mean, I grew up in sales, so your job is to get people to say yes. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to think I do it in an honorable way, so I'm not tricking people into it, but I like to find a way to weave a conversation and help myself understand what people's triggers are and why they might want to do business with me or my brand. So Thinking Fast and Slow is an expansion on the two brains that we have, not left and right, but there's the animalistic, responsive, fight or flight portion of our brain that serves a great purpose, by the way. It helps us breathe. Imagine having to think about breathing all the time. It would be
super important.
Yeah. However, the other part of our brain is that which is involved in, restoring memory, research, trying to understand somebody else's position, and Thinking Fast and Slow, as the name suggests, is there's a lot of things that we do quickly, and we do so generally because we're lazy, right? Like, think about a math problem. When's the last time you had a real math problem to figure out, and you look at it and you're like, whether it's in Excel or otherwise, you're like, do I really want to do this? It's not nearly as enjoyable as sort of the free flight, emotional, off the cuff stuff we do, but it's super important to, slow down, be thoughtful about the decisions that we make. And so I think one of the ways I describe to my team now, and I have a new team here, I let them know that, I'm slow to judge. That's a style I want you to know about me. I don't get overly excited about great successes or great failures. If somebody tells me something is like this, I hear them, I might even believe them, and then ultimately I'm going to verify it. But I take my time to make my decisions because I always want them to be excellent decisions. And I think that's, by the way, how I got this job.
I was about to say, as an executive, and Cash, we've talked, because we've had other CEOs on the show before, Garrett, and we've learned this, is that executives are almost fundamentally paid for their decisions. Because you're making decisions that are going to affect hundreds of thousands of dollars of manpower, thousands of units of product. I mean, just the ripple effect of every yes and no for you is substantial. And I'm actually curious about that because, again, I think as people build their businesses, they have to understand not only are your decisions important, but you can only make so many good decisions in a day. And you have to be really good at making sure you're making the most important decisions, right? Whether or not the counter is cleared in your salon is not nearly important as do we need to hire a marketing director, right? These are very different types of decisions. When you found yourself, as you climbed in these industries and as you climbed in these companies, and you found yourself in places where more and more you were making big decisions, how did you learn to, what do you feel that you've learned about making big decisions, and how has your confidence changed and grown as an executive, understanding the implications of your decisions and trying to make the best possible decisions you can?
I would describe my approach as inclusive, like I want to hear from a number of different people, yet I'm always clear about who has the decision right in the matter. So I want to hear from a lot of different parties. And then I'm also open to making the wrong decision and learning from it. And importantly, the bias of it, and like understanding our own biases. And one example of that is, if we're going to look at evaluating our commission model for our sales team members, and somebody makes a recommendation, well, I think it should be like this. And you think, wait, you know what? 7 years ago, we did that and it didn't work. So no, we're not going to go forward with that. That tends to be, again, the lazy way people think. Instead of stopping and thinking it through, well, is this a different environment? Is it a different company? Is it a different sales team? Might we want to look at doing something like that again? So checking yourself and making sure that you're not running roughshod over people because you know better. But this seems like a perfect opportunity to share with you one of the driving forces in me and my decision making. And I have to give credit where credit is due. I don't remember his name, but he at the time was the CEO of Novartis, the pharmaceutical company, and I learned this maybe a dozen years ago. He was remarkable in that he was, at the time, the first and only physician who had attained the role of CEO at a major pharmaceutical company. So imagine the perspective that he brings to that role. And I read this quote, and it made perfect sense to me, and I try to apply it in my everyday life and my business. He said, as a physician, you are well-trained and you're constantly updating your education. You see a lot of patients, and your patients rely on you to be able to make good and oftentimes very quick decisions. It might make the difference in saving somebody's life. So when you know what you should be doing and you know what the proper care is for a patient, you apply it right away. You don't ask others, you don't ask permission, you act because it's important to do so in the moment. But if you don't know exactly what you should do, you might have somebody's life in your hands, then you stop and you reach out to your wider community of physicians, and I'm sure today it's even more possible than ever to reach out through message boards or even live and say, hey, can anybody help me with this diagnosis and the appropriate care here? And I thought that's a really beautiful way to look at it. And in short, it's when you know what you should do, you just act upon it, right? And when you're not sure, you should not only slow down, but you should reach out to anybody you think who might help you.
I love that.
Because ultimately, your job is to make the right decision.
And to this day, you find that that's something that you apply?
Yes. Yes, it is. So unfortunately for my team, sometimes I'm in a meeting and say, this and this and this. I'll say, we're not doing that. I'm sorry, let's not.
Split decision. I know what the decision is. Yeah.
We're going to move on from that. But this is interesting. And I wanted to come back and answer the question that was posed before we went off on the tangent, before I took us on this tangent. Cash, you asked, how do I do my best to manage that inextricable thread of branding throughout our businesses? Again, I believe in collaboration. And so one of the best practices I've employed is it's known as the Blue Book. And if any of my friends are listening to this podcast, they'll have Ryan and his Blue Book. So the Blue Book is a collection of all of the information that matters in a company that is gathered every month. So I employ my head of marketing, head of product, head of operations, everybody who's a department head, head of finance. They contribute their reports to this blue book, and we as a team review them every month. And there's really two concepts behind it. One is that I believe people are smarter than we give them credit for. And we shouldn't assume that the head of sales is not interested in what the head of operations has to say about KPIs and whether we got a new great rate from FedEx versus UPS. I think people are generally interested and can absorb the information. And by doing so, we effectively every month are talking about what really matters in the business and are we aligned on it? And how do we make sure that we're making the right investments and that our communication is sound? And where I get to sit now in the C-suite, my belief has to be that then trickles down to the way they manage their teams and then ultimately the way we touch our customers.
I want to talk about the Blue Book for a second. It could seem very overwhelming to someone who's, wow, I have no organization of this type of stuff. It's me and maybe two other people in my business. We're small. What does this book look like? Can you explain what the format looks like and just give me a better idea? Because, this is something that I'm also interested in pursuing.
Yeah, I'll be glad to. First, the origination of the name. It was back, I believe, the 1600s, parliamentary England. They had a blue leather-bound book, which was the central repository for all of the information about crops, taxes, votes, etc. It was a blue book that all of this information went into. And that's where, by the way, I have to give credit to Troy Puccia, who was the head of finance at Bumble and Bumble and the Estee Lauder companies who introduced the concept, and I've just carried it on. But what it does look like and what it could look like is it can take, any shape or form. You just have to have the belief that everybody here in my salon, in my beauty supply store, in my company-owned store, my opticians, everybody deserves to know what we stand for, what we consider to be, what a good job looks like, how we track it. And, I think everybody deserves to know how hard everybody else is working on these issues. Because, again, in sales, I understand the perspective, which is I want everything in stock all the time. I want every order to ship perfectly within an hour. And that way I maximize my time on the road with my customers and customer satisfaction goes up. So when something's not in stock or it doesn't ship on time, if I don't understand what's going on behind the scenes and all the great work that's going into making that possible, then you're going to have, siloed teams, it's known as, and likely not a good culture. So as I think about a salon owner or a stylist manager, I think you know what you represent and you know what your client experience is meant to look like, from the flow to the greeting, to the seating, to the way we shampoo, to what do we do or not do when somebody is processing. Like, everybody deserves to know that this is the order of things and this is what good looks like. And by the way, this is what great looks like. And it's just that since I manage larger companies now, I have a whole team of people who help us make those decisions. And then we make those decisions collectively. I also share financial information, which I know I'm a bit unusual in this sense. Most companies like to keep financial and budgets, like the head of sales wouldn't know what the head of marketing's budget is. I think it's worth sharing. Yeah.
That's very interesting.
I agree 100%. And what I've found actually is that, like sales and marketing are supposed to sort of be like always at odds with each other, that the two warring, departments of any business. My wife is leading sales in one of our businesses and I'm leading marketing. So it makes for a perfect dinner discussion and a true testament to the quality of our marriage, I have to say. And we joke about that all the time. It's dang, if we can be married and be in sales and marketing, we've got something going here. But what I have found is that when people feel like they are a part of the larger system and a part of the larger team, and then they feel a part of the larger results, and they feel well informed to make autonomous decisions more effectively. And so what I found is that when sales understands the cost of what it takes and the work that it takes to get them the opportunities that they're getting, then they take a lot more ownership, and they
right.
take it a lot more seriously, and it becomes more personal in their performance than just give me the good leads, Glenn Glen Ross.
I was exactly what I was thinking of. These are the good leads.
Yeah,
to you, they're worthless.
Yes. Ryan, have you found? I want to learn more about this. Very curious. The benefits that you've found in sharing financials, because I know so many business owners, small business owners, they don't want to share publicly, interpersonally, intercompany, interdepartmentally. Everything's got to be a secret from the financial standpoint, or they might feel guilty for being profitable. Because as we know, a small business owner, they're taking home the excess, right? It's not going out to the shareholders. So tell me a little bit about the benefits you guys have experienced from being more transparent as a company.
Yes. Again, just from where I've been able to sit, it's not the same at all companies. As a matter of fact, I remember one company I worked for distinctly where I was told from the outset, we do not share this information. We don't share even from one sales rep to another how each other is doing. It's all just on the down low. We don't. And I thought, okay, again, it's good to understand that that's the company's approach and culture. And as that steward, I'm just meant to follow it and improve upon it. But in sharing information, here's the great benefit I find in it. First, everybody otherwise would wrongfully assume that there's a ton of money to be had. I mean, I don't understand why my T&E budget can't be increased. I mean, it's clear to see that hotel prices are going up and gas prices are going up. If you don't know otherwise, you imagine this pool of money that the company has that you're not getting, right? So that's one benefit of it. Another is, and you would likely find in most brands, that marketing has the biggest budget. If you take out sales compensation, because that's
right,
it's salary and comp in total. But if you look at where the company spends its money, it's likely on marketing. And if you understand how much effort goes into that, you might be more inclined to support it, right? It's wow, okay, I'm not the CEO, so I don't get to say how we apportion budgets, and not everybody wants to have that role either. But understanding, all right, this is how we're managing this. I think you are more inclined to maximize on what, in this case, marketing produces. Or in our case here at Garrett Leight, part of our story is we have two brands, the Garrett Leight brand and the Mr. Leight brand. Mr. Leight is Larry Leight. He was the founder of Oliver Peoples Eyewear. And he now creates the Mr. Leight brand. By the way, that brand sold to, I think, Oakley and then Luxottica. This industry is a lot like beauty in that, there's L'Oreal, and then
there's the huge whales, and then of course.
Certainly, Luxottica is the L'Oreal of eyewear, right. And then there's the indies like us. So we have Larry Leight designing a range for us, and we have Garrett, his son, carrying on the legacy in design, and we pay a lot for design, and rightfully so, because that's what is going to distinguish us from other brands. As I remember joining, or at least doing my interviewing, and I thought, well, how many SKUs do you have? Because at Bellami, one of the ways that we distinguish ourselves is we had the greatest assortment in hair extensions in the world. We had every length, every color, every method you might want, and if we didn't have it, tell us about it and we'll make it. That was our approach. And that also meant we had almost 5,000 stock keeping units to keep in stock at 5,000. And I remember looking into this stuff. I thought, well, I went on the website. I did, how many SKUs could you have? What do you have, 200 SKUs? Well, no. As a matter of fact, we have nearly 800 SKUs because you have a frame like this in a platinum. And then we also have it in a tortoise, and then we have a different lens for it, and we have all of these different things. So in order for us as a fashion-forward company in optics, we pay a lot for design development, and we pay a lot in cost of goods as well. All of our frames are hand-finished. Great many of them are made in Japan, which is all the more expensive. Some of them are made in the USA, and then, of course, in China for the rest of them. But I think when people understand that, hey, Garrett Leight is all about design, and then we put a lot into marketing so that people get a consistent and beautiful message from us, and that's what I'm here to support. That's where sharing budgetary information and financials, I think, pays off. When you believe that people will want to lean in and contribute and not retract and say, well, then if I don't have a say in the matter, I'm going to do only as much as I need to do.
Yeah. I think that some of the business owners are probably more fearful of mutiny or spotting unfairness or, those types of things. And that fear, I think, invites the wrong people into the business. So you create this culture from fear of transparency, right? And then people get into your business who would react that way. And it's strange that when you do that, you sort of attract those people. I know this from personal experience. And then when you do decide to share something, exactly what you thought was going to happen happens. But then instead, when you decide to be a transparent company and you do share things, and obviously not everything needs to be shared, but I do believe a degree of financial transparency is important. I 100% agree with you. Now, I wanted to go on a tangent here because you said something that I felt like I wanted to hit on. You are the capital or the arbiter of finances as well. You're there to maintain the brand, and you're there to make sure that appropriate financial decisions are made, and you hold those expenses accountable to returns for the business, right? And that makes you a capital allocator in the business as a CEO. I want to talk about capital allocation because it's not a topic a lot of small business owners think about, but there was a book called CEO Excellence that I read recently, and it studied a lot of 200 CEOs across multiple different industries. And that book mentioned that capital allocation was one of the top skill sets in some of these high-performing executives. And so I made it a really important skill that I wanted to undertake and learn forever. You're never done figuring out where to put money and get returns. But there's so many business owners that don't think about it, and so many people that don't even, maybe haven't even heard what capital allocation is. I'd love to hear from you how you think about that and how you approach where to put money in your business and what investments should be made.
All right, very good. Happy to take that. Because I was thinking at the top of our call that, as the general manager, president, CEO, all these roles I've had, and I'll just speak for myself. One of the reasons I wanted to do this thing is because I wanted a lot of responsibility. I wanted to manage a lot of money. I just didn't want it to be my own. And that is why I've had, for decades, very high level of appreciation for small business owners, medium-sized business owners alike, who actually have their own money in a business, because I'm always playing with somebody else's money. I think I've done fairly well at it, but I've always been really clear. It's not like my mortgage that's at stake here, but I've had a pretty good track record, and so they let me continue doing it.
By definition, you have a great track record. You don't get to be the CEO of 4 major brands in a row unless you're good at managing other people's money. So I'll give you that one, Ryan. You can have it. Okay. You've got the gold star.
I consider that a personal KPI. So
there you go.
For that recognition. But I look at the management of finances in 3 different ways. So 3 different lenses, if you will. There's the big one, the capital allocation, like the big things that you're going to do. At Garrett Leight, we're going to open a few more stores. That's part of our 2024 business plan. And so there's market research that needs to be done. You got to be in the right place. You got to be, for us, you got to be in a cool neighborhood. And, that's why Venice, Silver Lake, Austin, Hayes Street in San Francisco. These are things that are important to us. So we're going to do our research there. We're going to spend some money to get the people who are really talented in these areas to help us understand where we should open next. There's, of course, the actual capital that is sunk in it, which is something that, through accounting standards, you will depreciate it over the course of time. But it's real money, and that goes out of your cash flows. And so those are probably the most critiqued expenditures that you have. And I think it's important to, as I said earlier, make sure you have consensus, because here it can't just be like the world according to me. I have an idea where I'd like to open a store in Miami, but we're not going to do it just because I think that's where we should go. We're going to let data, make decisions for us. Or I've got to make sure my store team feels, my head of HR feels like we're going to be able to recruit the right management and personnel to run those stores. So it's very collaborative, and then you just do it, right? You finally decide to pull the trigger, and for the most part, in this example, you're stuck for 5, 7, 10 years, in a lease, which could be onerous over the course of time. So that's one lens that I look at. Are we taking actual cash from the company for a long-term investment, and what is the likelihood of return? Then in budgetary management, there's the other two lenses that I look through. One is the things that we know we're going to do, and we're going to monitor it, whether it's variable expenses, fixed expenses. Are we going to order inventory as if we are 20% above prior year, and now 3 months later we're only 10% above prior year? You've got to have a system of checks that you take yourself through and you take your team through to make sure that it's hard to be in lockstep with your business, but you want to be as close as possible to managing month to month, quarter to quarter, semester to semester. So that's another way to look at it. And the third way, and again, I want to give credit to the Estee Lauder companies. I'm not just here because of how wonderful I am. I was a sales guy who was a sales director who became a VP of sales, and good for me. But they asked me, what path do you want to take in your career? There are a number of different paths you can take. You can go, you're the hair guy, but you can work in skin or color cosmetics. You can move. You can go be a regional manager in Korea or Germany and expand your horizons there, or you can expand your horizons throughout your current area of business. And I said, well, that's it, by the way, that's it, because I know a lot about a lot, but I'm not the best at any one thing. So I want to be a general manager is like sort of the conclusion that we came to. And they gave me opportunities through executive development and mentoring where I learned finance and I learned PR and I learned legal and I learned financial management. And one of the financial management rules I learned at the Estee Lauder companies is to have what's known as a contingency. So we're going to put a business plan together and everybody thinks it's going to be great and everybody thinks we're going to make our goals. And you need to be ready to answer the question, what if I do and what if I don't? So by the way, what if I do? What if I do? Do I have some money set aside? If this thing works out better than we thought, can I infuse more money into it to make it even more successful and stoke that pot fire? Mm-hmm. By the way, if it ain't working, what money can we drop to the bottom line so that we don't have just a complete loss of either a project or even a year? It's known as contingency fund management. And it's something that I've been doing for almost 10 years now, since I learned that discipline.
We do that in the film world. So by day, Ryan, I'm a film producer, and every feature film budget, every project always has a contingency line, and it's anywhere between 7 and 10% of the budget. And the expectation is, if we don't need it, that's great, because again, film is a little different. We're not selling a product per se, but from a production perspective, hey, if something goes wrong, we need to have some room to navigate. So that concept of what if, and yes, what if it goes well, what if it goes poorly, that is such a great mindset to have in anything you're doing financially or anything business end. Cash, is that something you do in your companies? Do you think about in terms of contingency and risk management like that?
Yeah, actually we do. And we're actually in this economy. I have two businesses, one in manufacturing and one in real estate I have more than two businesses, but these two are very subject to volatility in economic shifts. So real estate and manufacturing are both susceptible to follow markets, up markets, down markets, and they drop pretty quickly. Real estate is a lagging market because of the length of time that it takes for a market to catch up in perception of value. And so we have to, when we see that something's shifting, we get a little more time to start increasing reserves in the business. And so what we do is that we actually start scaling back our capital allocation toward growth. and start setting more aside. And we watch the economy very closely. So the economy, property values, sale prices, lots of KPIs that we watch that help us manage what we are holding back from investing. Because remember, every time you hold something back, you have an opportunity cost to that. And if what you think is going to happen doesn't happen, then we lost all of that time and that growth and that momentum, right? And so this is a very, very interesting psychological game to play because in that business, I'm an investor and a business owner. And so we're making investments in the business that are very tied to the market conditions. And in manufacturing, we're looking at things like how long an item sits on the shelf. So turn rate, for example, and how much investment are we making to something? Sometimes we've made investments in the business. Ryan, I'm sure you've seen this happen before where you have a physical product that has a shelf life, right? And you have the clock starts ticking the moment you spend those dollars to recoup the benefit on that investment. And if that turn rate is not fast enough, if you can't turn that product, the simple solution is to start discounting or spend more on marketing or get it out there. And you can easily get into a spend spiral when you start losing. And so your psychology, I think, it plays a powerful role. And that's why I'm so fascinated by capital allocation as a business owner. And Ryan, your ability to do it for so many years consecutively across so many different companies, because it is a skill you have to develop as a business owner. If you don't have it as a business owner, you have to have someone doing it, whether that's your CFO or somebody helping you do forecasting and do trailing assessments. So, did what we expected to happen? Why and why not? Do it running postmortems on every investment you make in your businesses. I think these are critical things. And so, yes, we absolutely practice this, and maybe even in a different way than Ryan does. And we, sometimes we won't even hold our capital in a bank account, like a cash account, but some of it'll be in a money market account and things like that. So it'll be held in different ways in different places. But for the most part, I think it's one of the most important things you can do to remain safe as you attempt to grow in a business.
Can I turn that into, I want to be mindful here of your time, Ryan, so we're going to have to let you go here in a second. But I think this is something that absolutely anyone who's in business is thinking about, which is where the world is headed, right? And that's a very complicated thing to discuss or to consider in many different respects. But again, going back to this point we made earlier, your job is to make decisions. And we're talking about capital allocation, and we talk about extraordinarily important decisions. And you talk about, making a 10-year commitment on a property in a high-end neighborhood for a brick and mortar store. And, we just had COVID 2 years ago where all of a sudden brick and mortar just didn't even exist. So how do you look at the future, and what are you doing as an executive to feel confident as best as you can about decisions you're going to make for 2024 when it's not even clear what that year is going to look like? And I'm curious how you navigate that.
Yeah. Well, I will admit it was a lot easier when I was in beauty because I had it down. In almost 30 years, I'd been through ups and downs, probably 3 cycles of it. And so it was easier for me to predict. Here in fashion, eyewear, optical, I have a lot more to learn. I'm going to need to lean on more people, more publications to help me understand what the retail landscape is going to be and how it's going to dynamically affect, ultimately customers of our products. So it's more difficult today, but I'm less comfortable in this chair than I was a year ago, but that's okay because that means I know I'm growing, I'm learning, and I'm energized by it. And I have to make new decisions. I have to build new memory muscle to make those decisions moving forward. But one of the things I was thinking about as Cash was just talking is that what I owe to my investors is the plain truth of the matter. And I share this and drive this point home because, again, as a salesperson, I still am an optimist. And as a salesperson, I always thought I could make the sale, and I always thought I was going to make my goal, and I always thought the company had the best products. We were always going to do well. And I've had to modify that thinking as a CEO, because now I need to still believe that, and then I need to let facts make a lot of the decision, or at least the guidance for it. I've heard it said that we're going to make decisions based on facts, because if we're going to go strictly by opinions, then we'll just go with mine all the time. All right. So you owe it to your investors, I believe, whether that is minority, majority, or otherwise. I, by the way, am an investor now, thankfully. I have the opportunity here. So I have to be real with myself. But if the outlook is not as strong as the plan suggests it's going to be, then we can't keep acting like it's going to be there. And where a salesperson today might have an idea of how their October numbers are going to come in and maybe have a feel for November, I've got to be thinking about what the first quarter looks like and have to be realistic about that. And in this moment, there is a lot of unsurety in, well, I would suggest really every industry. I can't think of one, maybe besides gold, that would be doing particularly well based on the world unrest. So there's a lot that we need to be watchful for and realistic about. But now on an inspirational close, if I may,
please.
I've always thought it important to understand the worst thing that can happen for a company or a brand or a store is that it becomes successful and not be ready for it. Because that window is quite small, where you get the opportunity to stoke that hot fire and then make it, it's the flywheel concept. It takes so much effort to get something going. And then when it gets going, if it actually seems to be running smoothly, then you want to invest in it. You want to keep pushing it. You want to move on. And a couple of the companies that I've worked for were really excellent at that. And it requires, guess what? Capital. If you think about how many brands, call it beauty, because that's what I know best, how many brands were here 20 years ago and aren't here today? Many of us can think of a number of them. But if you thought, oh, why is that? Is it because the product wasn't good? No. Is it because they didn't have good distribution? No. Did they not have good salespeople? I would suggest they didn't have money. They didn't have the money to keep the business going. And whether that means you bring in an investor or your mortgage second on the house or whatever, if you really want to see something take off, be prepared for it to be successful. Know when it's not and what needs nurturing. But if it's going to be successful, you've got this small window to make it blow up. And there are a number of great examples of that in both industries that I think are noteworthy.
I think it's incredible and poignant to point that out. I think you called me out there in one sense, but I remember a time when I looked at businesses like Estee and, big brands like Bellami or things that just grew really fast, right? And it looked like they were leveraging momentum with such ease. And I thought you had to find a way to pay for all that yourself. And I just hadn't considered that small businesses also can raise capital for their investments. They can bring in limited partners, general partners. They can find angel and seed investors, even in early stages of the business. And I think that's where it's a whole nother conversation, raising capital that we're going to have on this podcast. It's a whole nother conversation because in this competitive environment where speed is more important than ever, positioning for sale is more important than ever because so many people know they can't really beat the big dogs, but they're designing to be acquired. It's more important than ever to have access to that competitive edge to buy the speed, and speed has to be paid for. It doesn't come from just working harder. There's only 24 hours in a day. It's just not going to happen. So I'm glad you called that out because I feel like I was really blind to that.
Yeah. I think that's so smart. And I think also small business, the mindset can be very much day-to-day and transactional. But if you are interested in thinking bigger and you are thinking about, like you said, Ryan, what if I end up having a runaway success? Then you have to start thinking about what problems will that engender? And am I ready to solve those problems? And it's good to come out there with a sense of optimism because otherwise, what are we doing this for? You're doing this so that things will go well. So you might as well plan for it. Ryan, I will fully admit there are literally 2 or 3 other buckets of things we were really excited to talk to you about. And this has just been wall-to-wall insights that I'm so pleased that you shared with us. Ryan, thank you so very, very much for your time. This has been tremendous.
You got it, Jordan. Thanks for the invite.
So much, Ryan. Good to see you too. Talk soon.
Thanks, man.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
If you're a hairstylist, if you're a creative professional, and you are interested in your financial well-being, remember to like and subscribe so that more episodes just like this one show up in your YouTube feed.